Speaker, this bill was introduced as an important response to stopping trafficking, sex trafficking at schools. In fact, its name was Stop Human Trafficking in School Zones. I introduced that bill to stop human trafficking in school zones. We're glad to be here on the floor of the House to continue this journey in protecting our children. I want to start with the words from the major city chiefs, one of the major supporters of this legislation. Child sex trafficking is one of the most despicable crimes an individual can commit. Sadly, there are far too many children victimized by this scourge. For example, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children received more than 17,200 reports of possible child sex trafficking in 2021. It's especially troubling that these crimes sometimes occur at schools, which should be a safe haven for America's children. Besides gun violence, human trafficking, sex trafficking, is a scourge that takes and destroys the lives of our children. H.R. 7566 will play an important part in addressing child sex trafficking by establishing additional penalties for offenders who commit these offenses in a school zone within 1,000 feet of a school-sponsored activity. We want to be heard on stopping human trafficking and sex traffickings at our schools. And so the No Trafficking Zones Act, which is formerly the Stop Human Trafficking in Schools Act, would ensure that schools across the country, including institutions of higher learning, are safe spaces for learning and academic exploration, free from the menace of sex trafficking. H.R. 7566 would establish a sentencing enhancement of up to 5 years in several instances. First, in the case of any person who commits the offense of sex trafficking within a primary, secondary school zone or on or within 1,000 feet of the premises of a school-sponsored activity or premises owned by an institution of higher learning. Second, for any person who commits the offense of coercion and enticement of a minor enrolled in a primary or secondary school or a person enrolled in an institution of higher learning to travel in interstate or foreign commerce and engage in criminal sexual activity while the minor is in a school zone or on or within 1,000 feet of premises where a school-sponsored activity is taking place or while the person is on or within 1,000 feet of the premises owned by the institution of higher education. And third, for any person who commits the offense of coercion and enticement of a minor using the mail or facilities of interstate or foreign commerce, such as the text and instant messaging or social media platforms which have been used extensively, while the minor who is enrolled in school or an institution of higher education is in a school zone or on or within 1,000 feet of premises where a school-sponsored activity is taking place or premises owned by the institution of higher education. Human trafficking is one of the greatest threats to human rights in the United States. It destroys a human being's life, and it destroys forever a child's life. In 2020, 11,193 instances of potential human trafficking were reported to the United States National Human Trafficking Hotline, with at least 70% of those instances involving sex trafficking, while an estimated 25% of all human trafficking victims in the country are in my home state of Texas at any given time, many of whom are minors. Mr. Speaker, I gave and held the first human trafficking field hearing in Houston, Texas, with my co-sponsor of this legislation, the Honorable Mike McCall. I want to at this time express my appreciation for his collaboration on this legislation, his enthusiastic collaboration, as he did join me when we held the first hearing on human trafficking in Houston through the Homeland Security Committee. What I would say is that Houston had been the epicenter of human trafficking. It was a powerful hearing, and I'm glad that we've joined together now to stop human trafficking in schools. Let me also offer my sympathy to him and his family for their loss. At least 5,359 of trafficking victims and survivors identified through the hotline in 2019 were under the age of 18, and in 2021, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children received more than 17,200 reports of suspected child sex trafficking. Many of these young victims of sex trafficking are students in school systems, colleges, trade schools, and universities across the country. A 2018 survey reported that in Texas, where no trafficking zone legislation passed with bipartisan support early this year, 55% of young sex trafficking survivors were trafficked while at school or school activities, and 60% of trafficked adults said they were first groomed and solicited for trafficking while on school campuses. That has been a hotbed of opportunity for the scourge of sex traffickers who want to prey upon our innocent children. I'm grateful that the legislation in Texas generated out of an effort chaired by Bishop Dixon, James Dixon, chair of the Sports Authority at the NRG Arena, and began to develop a policy where there would be no trafficking zones around major stadiums and events. Members of this body know all too well that children are sexually exploited in many ways. Some young people are trafficked by their schoolmates or people they once considered friends, and while the traffickers seek out young people who have noticeable vulnerabilities, including problems at school, conflicts at home, or even need to fill in a tuition gap caused by the loss of a scholarship, no child or young person is truly safe from the schemes of charismatic traffickers bent on exploiting and destroying young lives. With the proliferation of social media and the myriad ways in which we communicate with one another, traffickers have put these same means of communication to their own use to find, target, lure, groom, victimize, and exert control over their victims, while buyers are using technology to find and purchase sex anonymously. Traffickers have infiltrated every known form of communication, especially the sites, messaging apps, and social media platforms our children use most frequently, leaving young people more vulnerable to manipulation. Access to the internet, cell phones, and smartphones make it easier, Mr. Speaker, for traffickers and buyers to communicate with children and youth, even when they're at school, in class, or attending school-sponsored activities. There are no barriers, no walls, no brick walls, cement walls, steel walls that can keep a trafficker from getting a precious child. As a result, trafficking has reached the halls, lunchrooms, gyms, dormitories, and classrooms of schools, colleges, and universities in every corner of the United States of America. These staggering facts and statistics led me to introduce this bipartisan legislation, the No Trafficking Zone, along with Chairman Nadler and Representative McCall, who I wish to thank for working with me, as I've said previously, as well as Representative Johnson of Louisiana for his amendment that included the protection for young people at institutions of higher education. We came together in a bipartisan manner to exert the influence necessary to protect America's children. Collectively, I again want to thank Chairman Nadler, Representative McCall, Representative Johnson of Louisiana, Representative McCall of Texas. I am delighted to work with them. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.